I know better than to feed the trolls. And in fact, going into my 4th year of making Mindshift videos, one of my changes that I've set out for myself is to engage with trolls way less. And I might get that wrong sometimes, but generally it's pretty easy to tell if someone is acting in good faith or not. However, this one troll today is about to get fed a little bit as a byproduct of me speaking about the subject matter they brought up, which is really good subject matter to think about and discuss when you are in the process of deconstruction or deconversion. So this is what Joey Arrogance had to say on my video about truth last week. Well, what on earth do we have here? Brandon is coming out saying that as an atheist, he believes that truth matters. Well, let's put this to the test. Below are statements about truth and atheism, and I invite any atheist to prove any of them wrong. Who now is going to come out and swing a big pair of balls at me and refute my statements? Is there any atheist who will take up my challenge, or do I declare victory now? And then he lists these 10 statements, and that's what we're going to go through. Now, I already put up a really quick reply for anyone that was reading the comments so they could have a counterpoint here, but I want to discuss it a little bit further with you now. His first point is that atheists cannot define truth, but we can. He may not agree with it, he may not like it, but to say that we cannot is silly. Now, if we want to take all of this to the next philosophical level as we talk about truth, and we want to say that the only truth has to be objective truth, and can we really ever know what objective truth is? Aren't there things we've thought represented reality better until we found out more later, and then we backtracked, which means maybe we shouldn't be so quick to declare other things. And I am all for all of that thinking. We've all seen incredibly sharp minds debate on the very concept of what is truth and get nowhere. Just because Christians have a simplified assertion of an answer that it's their God or what their God says or what their God declares or what their holy scriptures speak of does not all of a sudden mean that they own the concept of truth. I can define truth like many other people have defined truth, and I think it's a really good working definition. It is that which comports to reality best. Not perfectly, because reality is something we're still discovering. There's so many parts of reality, and there's many things we can't know. We either don't have the technology yet, or we don't have the experience yet, or possibly our brains just aren't wired to be able to do so. But here's where you're going to continue to see the difference between someone who poses these kinds of statements and thinks they have it all figured out because they have a little book and they have a God in the sky, and someone like myself. And it comes down to being okay with acknowledging the limitations you have. You see, the believer who is staunch like that cannot acknowledge any limitations. If they believe Jesus is the truth, then Jesus is the truth, and anything short of that is blasphemy. Now, I can think a lot of things are truth and find out that I'm wrong, but it's in the search for more accurate truth, a truth that isn't being debunked or falsified in some way. And what I want this to be for a lot of people in the in-between deconstructing and deconverting is an allowance, a permission that you don't have to have answers you used to pretend to have just to counteract the claims made in your former life. But Christians will love to tell you you have to. Oh, you don't believe in God anymore? Well, what about truth? What about meaning? What about purpose? What about morality? And when you're honest and you are trying to take time to figure out what you think about those things in a godless world, they say, ha, see? Like it's some kind of an answer, like it means anything. All it means is you are not willing to jump to dishonesty from a place of comfort. And that's what's so funny about getting this comment on that last video, when my first point of 3 was that truth is more important than comfort. Because when we sacrifice, when we reverse that order and we say, you know what, this particular claim of truth makes me feel better, so I'll just say that's the truth or continue to believe that's the truth, especially despite other evidence against it, that's not good. That's what I'm saying. And I've done work in other episodes to show why that's not good and what it leads to. That's not the point here. Not to be that guy that says Merriam-Webster defines truth, but again, we can make descriptions and definitions here. Truth is the body of real things, events, and facts. I'm fine with that. But there are times that we can't know those things, in which case we don't know the truth. It doesn't mean we can't define what truth is. That's such a stupid, unnecessary limiter to try to make your point about your God. Let's move on. The second one is that atheists cannot know truth. And of course, there is a difference between being able to define something and being able to know it. But this also is incorrect. Just because I can't know all truth doesn't mean I can't know any truth. I've given the example like 3 times now, but it's just too easy, of the fact that me and my wife are married. This is a fact, a real fact, which is the definition of truth in the dictionary. I can know that fact. I have a wealth of evidence outside of just my feelings about my wife that prove it is a fact under the definitions of what marriage is and what that looks like legally, and if we went through that legal process and have witnesses, and not to mention the video footage, the people that we invited, the venue that we paid, all of that. Like, of course I can know some truths, but we can know truth as well as anybody else, right? Because if you were just saying humans can't know truth, then we can get into the conversation about, well, maybe we can't know objective truth. And so if that's what you mean, then yeah, we all fall short there. But when you say atheists can't know truth, what you're implying is that Christians can. And yet Christians, when pressed about what God has revealed to them about a certain subject matter, disagree with each other. Denominations disagree with each other. Interpretations of the Bible disagree with each other. That's not truth. And some of that happens because you try to rely on these sources like divine revelation, being spoken to in dreams, having the living word of God come to life in your heart. But the way that we've been able to actually know the real facts about reality that we've known so far is through the scientific method, and evidence and reason and experience and all kinds of things that go into how we know what we know. The only real difference I see in being able to know truth between a Christian and an atheist is that the atheist doesn't have to take any claim of truth on faith alone. We can just say we don't know when we don't know, and say we think this is probably the closest guess we have to what is true, meaning what is comporting with reality, and we're willing to change our mind if we find out we're wrong. Where would you rather be? Where do you think is the more virtuous place to be? Pretending to know, or being willing to say, I don't know? And again, all of us can know some things sometimes. The third one was strange. Atheists cannot say where truth is. Now, I have no problem saying that some of the concepts we talk about are not GPSed. Concepts like love and truth. They don't exist in a room. They are indeed concepts that help us describe reality in life and feelings and predictions in better ways. But there's only one place where truth can be found: in the reality that it's trying to represent correctly. It's not going to be found in made-up, man-made religions that were gap fillers to ease your existential dread. That doesn't mean there's not some metaphysical truth about what it is to be human lurking deep in religion. Of course there is. It's a part of our history. But again, if you're saying atheists cannot know where truth is, meaning that you, the Christian, can, or believer, you saying it's in my God doesn't solve anything. It's just another claim. The fourth one says, atheists cannot say what truth they have that Christians don't have. What I'm saying is that Christians often claim certainty that they haven't earned just because it's in a book that they adopted as perfect truth because someone else told them it was perfect truth. And that's not the case for all Christians anyways. A lot of people don't believe the Bible is inerrant, but in general, believing that your God is perfect truth is a claim that comes from the Bible that you believe to be true. And fine, but when you tell me I need to believe it as pure truth, otherwise he's going to torture me, and I say, I disagree, it's a very different conversation than whatever is trying to be alluded to here. I don't think atheists have some exclusive truth telling abilities in general. We are susceptible, like everyone else is, to confirmation bias or being indoctrinated or not looking into things carefully or accepting the more comfortable answer over the more truthful one. Like, none of this at all, anything I've ever said, has been to say that non-believers are smarter or have access or have secret knowledge that believers don't. Never. But the opposite is true. And that's the truth that really matters here, because it's Christians who claim this outright. Christians will stand there with a straight face and say, I know it has been revealed to me by the creator of everything, a truth that you, as someone living without the Spirit of God in them, can't understand and doesn't have access to. So how dare you try to flip this around? Let's move on. The fifth one is atheists cannot say that atheism is true. At this point, if you are the kind of Christian or troll or whatever this is supposed to be that still says things like this, it's a clear sign to all of us who have done the work of going through the arguments that you've never considered the other side's position ever, not even for a single second. Speaking like this is such obvious tribe thinking. You are just saying stupid things that have been said by people in an enclosed group that are so clearly and obviously explainable and better understood if you had any intention of caring what your opposition actually was saying or thinking. For the 916,000th time, atheism is not a worldview. Atheism is not claiming to be able to explain everything or to know everything. It is the position that I am not convinced that a god or gods exist. And in some cases, that can look more forthright. I am convinced that the Christian God does not exist. I'll make a positive statement there, but I have no idea if other gods exist. That's why I call myself an agnostic atheist. One has to do with knowledge, one has to do with belief. I don't believe in your God. That doesn't mean I know everything else all of a sudden. Take any individual proposition, and if you don't believe it, now let me apply this stupid question to you. I tell you grasshoppers are eternal. You don't believe grasshoppers are eternal. So if we called that lack of belief a grasshopperism, and I said something like, a grasshopperists cannot say that a grasshopperism is true, you would look at me with the same confused face that I'm looking at you with now. Because here's the deal. I am not convinced this God exists. So yes, it is true that I am an atheist. It is true that I am not convinced of this God. But me not believing in it doesn't mean I have to show you how I could be wrong about that. Prove he exists in the first place. You're the one making the positive claim that he absolutely does. Let's move on to the next one. Atheists have no reliable source for truth. Again, you're just going in circles. A reliable method, not perfectly reliable, but more reliable than, say, faith, would be repeatable studies. As one example, we want reliable methods that can be tested, that can be corrected. Yours doesn't even allow for correction, that can be shown to work. You don't care if what you preach doesn't work. You just tell people they're possessed or they're sinning too much or God has other plans or whatever. You're not interested in truth. The idea when you put forward these 10 statements about truth and atheism as if you are so concerned with the philosophical accuracy of the concept at large and how it plays itself out for believers against non-believers is utter bullshit when we see how little you care about truth, starting with having a good faith interaction in the first place. I'm supposed to believe you care deeply about what is true when you profess things with no evidence, when your holy book says from the deity ascribed as truth, Jesus, that he told one of his followers it would be better if he believed without evidence. That is not a philosophy of seeking truth. Number 7 says atheists cannot say their mental faculties are designed to recognize truth. Yep, finally got one right. I've been saying this for years, and not just me. Like, we know this. You know how we know this? The science of studying the brain has shown us this. The looking into psychologically to how our brain functions have taught us this. Our brains evolved as a tool for survival. Our brains are all about pattern recognition. That actually means we err a lot. The example that a lot of us have given many times is if you see what looks like a lion in the tall grass, it's better to go ahead and assume, even incorrectly, it's actually a lion and take the proper precautions. The brain that sat there and thought, I don't know, my brain might be tricking me with its pattern recognition, was eaten. But we don't live in that world anymore. And so we do get to contemplate some of these things, and we do get to see the biases and the errors in our thinking, and we do get to try to correct for them. But again, you're saying all of this at the negative for the unbeliever because what the believer does, you think your God gave you and your brain a designation for seeking out truth? Your God says that your heart is deceitful above all else. Your God says not to lean on your own understanding. It is actually you disrespecting your God by using your own thinking, your own understanding, to say that that verse is correct when it tells you not to lean on your own understanding, just to turn around and claim that God gave you a brain for understanding, but forbidded you from using it, while we, the non-believer, are just what? Like, do you see how silly and stupid this gets so quickly? All of this might matter a little bit if your God were true, or even if Christians could act like he was. But the amount of hypocrisy, the amount of dishonesty, the fact that nothing is different between believers and non-believers in moral action or ability to not lie or gossip or other things that are related to the truth, it's so stupid for you to still act like you're on some high horse, like you're on some upper echelon of reality, looking down at us silly atheists, banging our heads against the wall in incorrectness. You have so much work to do before I should have ever even answered these questions for you. But again, they're not for you. They're for people that have been tricked by people like you for far too long to get a little bit of clarity. 8. Atheists cannot say there is anyone to act as a guarantor for them to know the truth. Nope. We don't believe in one perfect, ever-living, ever-existing, outside of time and space, but definitely concerned with time and space entity that somehow holds up truth, the concept of truth in its utter being and self. But just because you claim you have that doesn't mean you do. Again, the difference falls back between the willingness to be honest. And I wonder what you say for people that do believe, but believe differently than you. People that believe in Allah that are Muslim, or believe in Krishna that are Hindu. If they believe they have a guarantor for the truth, but it's not the same guarantor as you, or the same truth that yours guarantees, what do you do with that? Or is it just easier to always talk about what atheists don't have simply because we're not willing, this is the irony, we're not willing to lie about it. I am not willing to say, yes, I do when I don't. And to you, that sounds like victory on your side. That's disgusting. Next, atheists cannot provide a true definition of atheism. We have many times. There is a psychological definition. There's two. There is a dictionary definition. There are working definitions. We have told you 1,000 times. You can look at the breakdown of the words. Theism, atheism, a meaning not or without. Theism, belief. Without belief. You don't have to like it, but that is what that word means. Redefining positions for me does not equal a one argument for you. The saddest part of this is I actually think this character, troll-like or not, really thinks they got me, that they got all atheists, that they figured out all the things we don't want to admit. I wish you could just be in my brain for a second to know how much I understand, how little you understand about this, and how unbelievably wrong you are. It's just silly. I'm not trying to be rude, but it's like watching a child try to talk about trigonometry, not because atheists are so much smarter and understand trigonometry inherently where believers don't, but because you are so far away from being able to speak about the concept or the word atheism in any kind of an honest way or way of understanding at all, that it's just clear you have no idea what you're talking about. Factually, we can define truth. We can know certain things that are true or are not true. We can define words. We can know what those definitions are, where they stem from, and how people use them. You just trying to take everything away semantically because it doesn't fit your God box doesn't change reality. But thank goodness we are almost done. Number 10, atheists cannot provide a true catalog of atheist doctrines. And at least you get to end on a high note of you being right. We cannot because there are not. Did you just win? Because the false religion you believe in has claimed doctrines. That's all it takes. Because I being willing to say, honestly, I don't believe, and that others that don't believe, like me, we didn't get together and make up prescriptions about what people have to think or say or do. We didn't ascribe any doctrines to this thing of not believing, means that what? We're lesser than you? Your God all of a sudden just magically exists? This is so silly. And I know I'm never going to convince Joey Arrogance, and I could care less too. But I do genuinely care for so many people in the in-between that hear stuff like this, and they hear it with that pretentious, holier-than-thou attitude that has been put on them for so many years in their belief from their parents or their pastors or whomever, and it scares them. It makes them second guess. And that's great, second guess. But don't pretend to know what you don't just to avoid the made-up consequences for not doing so. Not for comfort, not for tribe, not for certainty. Joey is so hell-bent on actually preserving the truth of his religion to protect himself, despite any cost, that he has to make things up that simply are not the case against those who have scrutinized his belief. These kinds of statements are what people really do try to put forward, what people really do think non-believers just fail at, and what makes their religion true. Like, it's utter insanity. And I didn't do a perfect job, but I hope I gave you a few jumping off points to go and investigate more for yourself, to think through more on yourself. I don't have all the answers. I just don't believe in this God. And I happen to have thought through a lot of this, and I'm offering that to you. But what you cannot do is tell me atheism or atheist are or are not certain things inherently, because they are not some of the things that Christians claim only Christians are. That's never going to fly. So that's it. Thanks so much for being here. Have a wonderful day. I'll see you Sunday with a new video. And until then, and as always, keep thinking. Thank you to my top tiers of support: my Iconoclast, Ann, Boris, Chris, Greysteel, Gnarlywill, Grant, GVI, Jimmy, Joe, Kitboga, Matthew, Perry, and Shawn. My Humanist heroes: Chris, Craig, James, Jared, Christy. My Atheist advocates: Aquitar, Caleb, Dakota, Dan, Drew, Jeff, Jeffrey, Jeremy, Jugs, Julie, Malcolm, Paul, Rega, Sparky, and Thomas, as well as all of my secular scholar patrons. If you enjoy Mindshift, would you consider joining these fine people? Thanks, and have a great day.